Hi and welcome to Quilting with Lori. My name is Lori Dickman. Today I have some fun little projects that we're going to be working on. They're simple and quick projects that you can create for Thanksgiving. Maybe it's something that you'd like to create as decor for your own home, or maybe you're being invited to a Thanksgiving meal and you'd like to bring something to that hostess. So here are some great ideas for you. Stay tuned. Let me share with you the three blocks that I'm going to be showing you how to create. This one is the pumpkin block, and that's something you could easily make any of these into pillows or table runners or placemats, whatever you'd like, or even a wall quilt. And there's the turkey. So we have the acorn, the turkey, and the pumpkin, and all of these blocks were made using my Speedy Solutions techniques. If you're not familiar with my techniques on how to get your scrap stash cut, sorted, organized, stored, and ready to use, then you'll want to watch the video that corresponds to this book. I will link below the video so that you can watch and see how I do this. Plus, I'll also link in the description box below my book set here. This is the techniques book, and this is the corresponding patterns book. Between the two, you're getting a total of 17 scrappy patterns that you can use to use your scrap stash to create. So it's really fun, great way to use up those scraps. Nothing goes to the trash, everything can be used. So check that out when you have a moment. But now let's take a look at these three different blocks and how I've put those together. So in the description box below, I'm going to have the PDFs that are required. This one is for the acorn. This one is for the pumpkin. I also have the PDF for the turkey. And the turkey does require templates, so I'll have that attached as well. And for the acorn block, I do give you an idea on how to create a wall quilt if you're interested in doing that. There's so many fun things you can do with these three patterns. They're all using your scraps, and they are 12.5-inch blocks. So when they finish in any projects, they'll be 12 inches. For those of you that aren't familiar, I do have a 52-week series, or it's a playlist, of scrappy blocks. For one entire year, every Monday, I put a scrappy block pattern out on my YouTube channel, and I have literally gone through and printed out all of the PDFs for all 52 of them, so I have them in a notebook. And I would recommend that you do that. Those 52 weeks of blocks are out there for you. I'll have the playlist below. You can just click on that playlist and you'll see that all 52 of them are there. In the description box under each video, when you open it, you'll find the PDF. Some of them are just a PDF of instructions. Some of them have PDFs with templates. So make sure you grab both of those as you're going through and creating your notebook. I highly recommend that you have a notebook like this with all of these patterns. You will never run out of ideas then for creating some type of quilt or a project. So now I'm going to take you to the three videos that will teach you how to make each of these blocks. They will be right in a row, and then I will come back and see you at the end. So here we have just a small table runner that I've created using two blocks. Now these two blocks were actually made with just 4 rows of 4 of the 2.5-inch squares, plus we did curve some of the ends there, and I'll show you how that's done. But for the block that I'm going to share with you, it is going to be 5 rows of 5 2.5-inch squares, because I do want each of my blocks for the next 52 weeks to finish at, or to be 12.5 inches, and then they'll finish at 12 inches in the quilt that you make. I want them all to be the same size. So let's take a look at that. So as you can see here, I have pulled 2.5-inch squares, and they're predominantly oranges, rusts, golds. Some are light, some are medium, some are darks, and the scrappier the better. And your block, your pumpkin, doesn't actually have to be completely orange. You can add some browns in there, greens, whatever you choose. This is your pumpkin, so you can choose whatever color scheme you'd like for that pumpkin. We are going to use some creams here, in the case of my pumpkin, to create half square triangles on these outer 4 squares in order to create the curve on the pumpkin, and you'll see how this is done as soon as we get to the sewing machine. This will be the stem, and then you need to pull 2.5-inch strips, and that's what we're going to use to finish out the bottom 3 sides and the top 2 sides here to create the 12.5-inch block. So let's go up to the sewing machine and we will get started on putting this block together. So you'll see here that I've got my pumpkin blocks laid out. Again, these are 2.5-inch squares. All of these are 2.5-inch squares. I have laid them 5 by 5, 5 across, 5 down. And I have pulled 4 2.5-inch cream colored scraps because I'm going to make half square triangles of these outer 4 squares to create a curve to the pumpkin. And I do have one dark stem, so this is a 2.5-inch square for the dark stem, and then we're going to be including 2.5-inch strips on that. Let me show you what that looks like. So I've also pulled some 2.5-inch strips in light, and this is what we'll be using to finish the top of the pumpkin and the sides of the pumpkin. So before we start sewing the rows of the pumpkin together, I'm going to take the outer 4 squares to this pumpkin and I am going to create half square triangles. So I'm simply going to take a cream and a print, put them right sides together, draw a diagonal line on each of those. I'm going to be sewing on the diagonal line in this case to create this half square triangle. Typically we sew on either side of it, but in this case we are going to simply sew right on the diagonal line. So I'm going to start stitching directly on the diagonal line. Okay, now I think you can see what I'm doing. Again, I have this, it's called Add a Quarter ruler, and there's a lip there which allows you to find that seam allowance. I'm laying it on there and cutting away this excess. And this will be my half square triangle. I'll take these all and square them up and then press them, and I'm going to place it over on the corner of the pumpkin to create that curved unit that we need. And I'll do that with the rest of these and I'll be right back. So now what I'm going to do is web this block. You'll see I have it laid out 5 rows of 5, and right now I'm just going to deal with the pumpkin. We'll deal with the stem later, but we're going to start up in the left corner and I'm going to flip the first block second row onto the first block the very first row, and we're going to bring it to the sewing machine and start sewing 1/4 inch, and we're going to work our way all the way down this first and second column. So I'm bringing the second block, flipping it over onto the first row. There we go. This is called webbing the block. It helps keep everything in order. Taking the third one, flipping it onto the first row. Fourth one, flipping it onto that first row. And then this last one, we're going to flip it on top of there. All right, so we have our first 2 columns sewn together. Let me get rid of this little guy here. And we'll see what we've got. Okay, so there's the first 2 columns of the pumpkin all sewn together. Now we're going to do the 3rd column, the 4th column, and the 5th column just by flipping these blocks onto the previous row as we sew down. All right, so we've webbed the columns so far. Now we're going to web the rows and get those sewn together. And then last, I'm going to show you how to attach your stem to your strips here, and I'll give you those measurements in just a minute, as well as the side measurements. One thing I wanted to just clarify is on all of these corner units, which we've created half square triangles out of two 2.5-inch squares, a cream and a print, Once I created the half square triangle, I did have to press it open and then square it up to 2.5 inches so that they matched the rest of the squares. If you're having a hard time getting a 2.5-inch square to result from using 2.5-inch squares, just grab 3-inch squares in the creams and the pumpkin colors and create your half square triangle. And then when you open it and press it, you can square them up to exactly 2.5-inch squares, which is what you need in order for it to fit in the pumpkin block. Now I'm going to sew the rows together. It's going to start at the top, and you can work your way down. You can certainly pin if you want, but be sure to nest all of these. And what I would do is nest all of the seams in one direction for one row and the other direction for the next row. So for this first row, I'm nesting everything. The seam allowance is coming toward me on the top. I apologize if you hear my Boston Terrier. She's next to me sleeping and she's just started snoring. Okay, here is the first row that has been webbed, and now I will just continue working my way down the block until I have the whole thing webbed. So here I have the center portion of the block done. So here's the pumpkin, 5 rows by 5 rows. And now we're going to create the top portion of the pumpkin, and that's the 2 strips that will be on each side of the 2.5-inch square, which is the stem. Each of these strips is 2.5 inches wide by 4.5 inches long. So those are going to be needed for each side, and we'll simply sew the stem in between the two. I'll sew those and I'll be right back. So this top row, including the stem, is done. As you can see, I've sewn it, pressed it to the dark, and now I'm going to attach it to the top of the pumpkin. I'll sew that and I'll be right back. So the pumpkin is finished, the stem row has been added. Now we need to add a couple of sections or some strips on each side of this pumpkin in order for it to be a complete 12.5-inch square block. So my pumpkin block is finished. It is 12.5 by 12.5 inches. Once you've pressed it, make sure you square it up so that it is 12.5 inches square so that it fits with all the other blocks we'll be making. Maybe you'd like to make a number of these, maybe make a tote bag or a wall hanging or a pillow. There's so many different possibilities using this adorable pattern. Don't forget to download the PDF that is attached in the description box. There is a PDF that tells you, gives you the applique pieces that you're going to need for Tom the Turkey. So make sure that you either save it or print it. And do remember, whenever you're printing the PDFs, make sure you print them at 100%. Don't allow your printer to default to fit to page or anything else. Make sure you print them at 100% so that they're the exact size they should be. So now let's take a look at Tom the Turkey and what is required from our scrap stash to make him. So the first thing that I want you to notice is the PDF that's attached again in the description box, and it gives you all the parts and pieces that you're going to need to make Tom the Turkey. And just remember, if you're using fusible application for applique, then you do not have to worry about cutting out the seam allowance. The only reason you'd need to have this seam allowance is if you planned to do needle turn applique. But if you're using any fusible applique method, just cut or trace on the dark line that you see. You're going to need one body, you're going to need 2 eyes, you're going to need 1 gobble, 1 nose. You're going to need a total of 9 of the back feathers, 4 of the front feathers, and 2 legs. 1 has to be reversed. And that's what you're going to need for Tom the Turkey. And then it shows you here the layout on the top key there. So here is Tom the Turkey. He is just adorable. So what I did with all of my parts and pieces, I've got some heat and bond here. You can use steam-a-seam too. I would recommend a light steam-a-seam. A soft fuse is another really great one. It's got a paper back to it. And so what you'll do is simply lay your fusible interfacing over the, let me find my pencil here. You'll lay it over the PDF that I've given to you, and then you're simply going to trace the on the dark line, and you'll trace as many of these as you need. So in the case of the smaller feather, I would trace 4 of these on my paper, on the paper side, and then this is the glue side, as you can see. And then for my larger feather, I would trace 9 of them. For my legs, I would trace 2. 1 would have to be reversed. And an easy way to reverse it is just to flip it over, trace it on the back of the PDF so that you can see it, maybe place it up against a window, and that way, and then when you trace it on your fusible, you're going to follow that tracing, and then it will be reversed. And I'll show you that here in a moment. But that's what you're going to need to trace onto your fusible. It's a paperback fusible. Whatever paperback fusible you choose to use will be fine. Okay, so I have gone ahead and traced this leg so that it's reversed. So on the front, we have a leg that's heading off in that direction, and I have placed that PDF on paper. You could put it up to the window, and I just traced what came through there, and I'm seeing now the reverse. So we've got 1 leg going this direction and 1 leg going this direction, and that way when you trace that onto your fusible, you're going to have both legs, and each leg is going to be going in the correct direction because you need 1 reverse. So hopefully that explains that. Now let's take a look at all the other parts and pieces. Now you can make your turkey as colorful as you want, or make him all the same color. This turkey is yours. Have fun with him. Do whatever you will. So I simply went to my scrap stash and I pulled squares that would work for the different parts of him. Now this is a 6.5-inch square that I pulled for his body. I wanted to make sure that it was large enough, and I traced the body. Here it is in this template paper. I traced it on the fusible, and I just made sure that I had enough, and this 6.5-inch square was perfect for that. And then I pulled 6-inch squares in various colors for all of the feathers. And you'll see here that that's my legs, I guess, but you'll see on these, let me show you some that I've already done. So these are the 2 outer feathers, and I actually had enough with this 6-inch square to, I've already traced and cut out 2, which are already on the turkey here, and these are 2 more because I want to make 1 more block identical to him. So I have enough for 2 more. Out there I have this color, which is the next one, so I have 2 more that are traced that I can cut out.
The next one is this orange. I have 2 more on that I have already traced. And then I have this burgundy one where I have 2 more that I've already traced. And for the one that's right behind him, I just need 1 more. And another thought that I had would be fun to put like a hat on him. That would be really cute. If he had a brim, maybe that matched this top color, that would be an adorable hat for this turkey. So let's say you plan to use needle turn applique. So I have gone ahead and traced on template plastic all of these items, and you do want to make sure you include the seam allowances then if you're going to do needle turn. And then you're actually going to trace each of these items the required number of times on the back side of your fabric and include that seam allowance, and then you'll cut them out, and then you'll actually do a needle turn applique. And there are still people who love to do that type of handwork, that needle turn. For me, I want to get stuff done quickly. In fact, I need to get stuff done quickly, so I am using the fusible, and that's what I will be demonstrating today. So what I want to demonstrate for you is how to cut those elements out. So I have just taken squares of the fusible and obviously pressed them onto the wrong side of all of these squares. And then after I've traced them on there. And now that they're pressed on, the fusible has been pressed onto the appropriate color. I wanted the feet to be on a dark square, and I wanted all of these to be on these various beautiful bright colors. I'm going to cut them out now. So I'm simply going to use a scissors, cut them out, and then what you're going to do is remove the paper backing, and that allows you to place the elements on your background square, and just kind of make sure you like where the layout is before you actually press it down. So there's one of the legs, and I'm just grabbing that paper and removing it, and you can see, hopefully you can see the shininess there. That is the heat and bond, that's the adhesive. So there is one of the legs that can be used, and then of course I'll cut out the opposite one here in a moment, and it can be placed on the turkey. I'll take you step by step through this. You're going to start laying your elements from the back towards the front. So the first thing you're going to want to do with your background square, and let me grab this one from the back end here. You are going to take your 12.5 inch, and you might even want to cut out a 13-inch square. That just allows you some extra room, and you can always square it up later. And what I am doing here, let me move this out of the way. I am simply going to take this to the iron and make sure there's a nice crease, especially out here on these edges. Those will be the creases that I'll be able to follow as I start placing my turkey elements. So with these wings right here, there are feathers out here. For me, I placed them just below these lines, and I started placing all of those, and I made sure this green one at the top, it's the 9th one actually, because these all match, and that one it's lined up with this crease up here. I wanted everything to be about 1 inch or so in from the outside, and so I started with these, placed those down. Then I started laying these two, placed those down. Then I put the body in there, and once I was happy with all of that, then I went and pressed it. I pressed it all down once I was happy with the placement. I did put my legs here and left about 1 inch or so open. Now you could put your legs underneath, but I like the fact that the legs are visible all the way to the top there. That I think it just gives it a cute look. So that's what I have done. Once all of that was secured and pressed to the background square, then I placed the eyes, the nose, and the goblet. And the goblet is set off to the side. And you can put them on either side. It doesn't matter which side you put them on. And then I pressed those on there. Then I simply took it to my sewing machine, and I put in some light brown embroidery thread. You could choose any color you want. You might want to embroider it so that every single one of these is outlined in the color that it is, but I just used a light brown and I used it for the entire applique purposes, and I just did a very small zigzag. I believe it was a 2.0 in width and a 1.8 in dimension there. So that is what I did for everything except the eyes. When I did the eyes, I just did a straight stitch in a circle, and I'll show you some of that here at the sewing machine. So the first thing I'm going to do is crease. I'm going to quarter this background square, and I've cut mine at 13 inches. We'll trim it up to 12.5 when we're done appliquing. And I am going to put nice crisp crease lines in there. This way I can use those as guidelines when I'm placing my Tom the Turkey on this square. All right, I want to make sure that he's centered here so you can see this. And I'm going to start with these two. I've gone ahead and removed the paper so that you don't have to watch me remove that, but I've got most of it removed. I'm going to start by placing these first two pretty much touching in the center, and just underneath, there's the crease line. It's about 3/4 of the way. Let me look at my other one. Actually, my other one is completely underneath, so I'm going to move those down. I'm trying to match this other one. The next one that I had put on my turkey was the burgundy one. And then I went to the orange. And, whoops, wrong burgundy. I haven't cut those yet. I got to cut my burgundy. Actually, I did have them cut. I just didn't see them here. So let's put this back here. This will go there. It's kind of moving on me. And this one is going to go in the center. Now, I've got to even this up. I want both sides to look the same. Okay, I think I'm happy with that. Now we're going to put these little smaller front feathers on. And then, trying to get them even, then we'll put the body on. And I'm kind of looking at my other one over here just to see that I have the same amount of green feathers showing through. All right, let me flip this around so that I can just identify that I have them pretty much the same. These need to come out a little bit. And he's pretty much the same. So now that I'm happy with where he's located, I'm trying to keep the distance from each edge about the same, and the feet will come down here. I'm not going to press those on yet. But now that I'm happy with this, I am going to go ahead and press that down. And I'm not supposed to be using steam. Check your fusible. Every fusible is a little different. Make sure that you use steam or don't use steam, depending on what it requires. Okay, so now Tom the turkey he's all secured. Now I'm going to put his feet, his gobbler, his eyes, and his nose on. And don't forget to cut a reverse of the legs so that you have both sides. Press those on. Now I need to locate all of these parts and pieces. Okay, so you just heard Bailey, our Boston Terrier, going crazy at the mailman upstairs, barking like crazy. And I think she's finally quieted down. So now I'm ready to secure the gobbler, the nose, and the eyes on. I've removed the paper backing and placed them on there. I'm happy with their placement. So now I'm going to go ahead and press. And now I'm going to take it to the sewing machine, load up my thread and my bobbin thread, and get to appliquing. Okay, so here are my two blocks, one that I finished beforehand and one I just appliqued right now. It only took about 30 minutes, not even that, to completely applique this turkey. It's a very quick applique process. And I simply did a very tiny zigzag around everything except the eyes. For the eyes, I just did a simple straight stitch, so it's all, that would be a raw edge, applique there. And all of these basically are too. In some cases, the zigzag did cover the edge. In some cases, it didn't. But with the fusible web, I'm not concerned about it. It's going to stay. And I'm going to actually place these on each end of a table runner, and I'm going to find one of my blocks that I've already done to place in the middle. And it is going to be just an adorable table runner. So hopefully you all will make one of these table runners, or at least make the block. Maybe put together a fun pillow. Have fun with it. Use a variety of colors. Maybe there's a certain color theme that you are using for your Thanksgiving Day feast. So before I take you to the tabletop here and show you how to put this block together, don't forget there is a PDF that I attach in the description box below. It will give you the instructions, and I'll of course be teaching those to you in this tutorial. And there's also on the second page a sample of a quilt that you might be interested in making. It's a neat little wall quilt using this fun acorn block. So let's get started and see how this block goes together. For those of you who are new to my channel, I do want to recommend that you go out to a video that I have, and I will link that Speedy Solutions to Cut and Organize Your Scrap Stash video below in the description box. But that video will take you step by step on how to get your scrap stash cut, sorted, organized, stored, and ready to use to make beautiful quilts. This is the techniques book that goes along with that video, and this is an additional patterns book with beautiful scrappy patterns in there so that you can use these patterns and use up your scrap stash. So take a look at that. I'll also have the link to my website for this book set if you're interested in just checking that out. Now let's take a look at the block. Don't forget, as I mentioned, to pull that PDF. And basically, all of these 52-week series blocks have been 12.5 inches unfinished. They will finish in the quilt at 12 inches. And this one is a series of 2.5 inch blocks. We do have 4 half square triangles here. And to create those, we're going to be pulling 3-inch squares, and then after we make the half square triangle, we'll trim it down to 2.5 inches. We're pulling from our strip stash. And so I pulled some 2.5-inch strips from my light strip set, and I've pulled a 2.5-inch strip of dark. So you're going to need those from your strip sets. So let's take a look here. What I used for this block, I used an 8.5-inch dark for the roof top of this Acorn. I used two 8.5-inch side panels, if you will. Those are 2.5-inch by 8.5-inch strips for the side. I have pulled two of the 5.5-inch by 2.5-inch strips for this. So these are all 2.5-inch strips that I've pulled and just subcut them, 5.5, 8.5, and so forth. And then I have a 2.5-inch top, and I just wanted him to match the top of the roof there, so I have that for this particular square. Then these are my 3-inch squares. I have 2 lights and 2 darks, and I'm going to put these together as I've shown you many times using my Speedy Solution Scrap Stash. Right sides together, dark with a light, or whatever color combinations your pattern calls for. We'll draw a diagonal line. We'll sew a scant 1/4 inch on both sides of the line, cut on that, press it and square it up to 2.5 inches, and we'll end up with a total of 4 half square triangle units for this block. And so that's what we need. We also need a total of 14 2.5-inch mediums and darks to make up your Acorn. You've seen me put together half square triangle units many times on most all of these 52-week series of scrappy blocks. But what I simply did was place a 3-inch light and a 3-inch dark, in this case that's the size we needed, right sides together. I drew a line on one diagonal, corner to corner, and then I simply took it to my sewing machine and I sewed a scant 1/4 inch on both sides of that drawn line. It's kind of hard to see it. You can see it a little bit better on this one. And now I can simply cut on that and cut them apart. Before I do that, as I've shared with you before, I like to cut from sewing or stitching line to stitching line as I separate them. That just gets rid of some dog ears. And so that's how I like to separate my half square triangle units when I've done them chain stitch like that. So I've gotten rid of some dog ears. Now I can simply take my ruler and my rotary cutter and cut them apart. Whoops. Sometimes when I'm seated doing this, I'm not pressing hard enough. There we go. For squaring up each of these half square triangles, and they each need to be squared up to 2.5 inches, I am going to use my Clearly Perfect slotted trimmer, the trimmer A, and I'm going to use the 2.5-inch stitching line here. I'm going to match it up with that stitching line on the triangle, and I will cut around and get rid of the excess. If you don't have a Clearly Perfect slotted trimmer or any other fancy type of a trimmer, you can certainly just use an Omni Grid or any ruler that has a 45-degree angle in it. If you do have one of these, then you would simply press this open, and I will probably just press toward the dark, and then once it's pressed, then you will take your ruler, line it up on the 45-degree angle, and then make sure that everything is squared up here at 2.5 inches and trim away the excess there. So that's how you could trim it if you're using a square ruler. You would have to press them open first. Because I'm using this triangular shaped Clearly Perfect slotted trimmer, I do not have to press them open. I'll leave them just as they are right now. I'm lining up the 2.5-inch stitching line on the ruler to the stitching line on the triangle, trimming away the excess. There's not a whole lot. As you can see, that was all that I needed to trim away from the rest of that. But that's very important. That has to come away, or you're not going to get your block to go together well. And the Clearly Perfect slotted trimmer has these really nice little slots right there, which cut away that extra dog ear. And now I can take these to my iron and press them. They're now all squared up to 2.5 inches, and I've got all 4 of them finished here. I'm going to go press those, and I'll be right back. All right, so I've finished my half square triangles, and now what I have done is laid out the block so that it's ready to be sewn together. And I see I've actually laid it out so that it's facing me and it's upside down for you. I apologize on that. But we're going to first of all start with the top of the acorn. Here's his little stem, and these are the 2 5.5-inch strips. They're going to be sewn on each side of that little 2.5-inch square. That makes the stem. Then on this row, we're going to take the 8.5-inch strip. We're going to sew these light, dark half square triangle units there, and that finishes the little roof top to that acorn. Make sure that you orient these half square triangles properly so that it creates that slant there for the roof. Then we'll work on the acorn itself, and there are 4 rows wide and 4 rows down, and notice that I have the 2 little half square triangles down here, and they finish off the bottom of the acorn, so make sure that you orient those correctly as well. And once these are sewn together, then we'll sew these 8.5-inch strips to each side, and then we can sew these units together. So I'm going to go ahead and get that sewn. I'm going to start first with these 2 top rows, and I'll bring it back to the tabletop and show that to you when I'm finished. I've turned this around for you so that it's now facing you and the acorn is not sitting on its top as you're looking at it. These are the top 2 rows that I put together. That included the 5.5-inch light strips with the 2.5-inch square for his stem, and then these are the 2.5-inch half square triangle units sewn to each side of the 8.5-inch strip. So that's the top 2 rows. Now we're going to finish the bottom 4 rows, and we'll do that just by starting with the squares themselves, and these strips will be sewn to that once the squares are complete. So what I like to do is simply web my block. You've seen me do this many, many times. I'm going to start, in my case, this is the top left. In your case, it would be up here. But I'm going to take the second row, place it on top the first, bring it up to the sewing machine, stitch, bring this one up to the sewing machine, continue stitching, bring this up to the sewing machine, continue stitching, and bring this up to the sewing machine and continue stitching. I will have webbed the first 2 rows together. Then I'll bring it back here and pretend this first 2 rows are stitched. Then I'm going to grab the 3rd row and do the same thing. I'll grab this first one, lay it on top, and then I'll continue doing that with all 4 of these, and I'll do the same with the last 4 rows. They'll all be webbed together with 1 line of stitching. Then I can simply sew the rows together. It's just a very efficient way of webbing your blocks together so that things stay in the right orientation and you're less likely to get things messed up. So I'm going to go ahead and get that sewn. I'll bring it back to the tabletop. So I have webbed these 4 rows together, as you can see here. And they're all webbed right here, and now I can simply continue sewing these rows together. What I like to do as I'm working through each row is I'll finger press. So I finger pressed all of these this direction, I finger pressed all of this going this direction, all of this is going this direction, and all of this is going this direction. That way everything is laying opposite, and it will nest beautifully when I flip them together. And I finger press them at this point, and then once this portion is stitched together, then I'll take it to the iron and press it with the iron. So let me get these 4 rows together and I'll bring it back to the tabletop. This fun little block is coming together. So I have the top 2 rows here. This is now put together and pressed. I've pressed all of this up, and I've pressed each of these rows in opposite directions so they nested beautifully. Now we can attach these 2 8.5-inch light strips to the sides of the acorn. Make sure that you're doing this properly. This is the bottom of your acorn. These are the sides, and then we'll be able to put the top on. So let me put this together. I'll put it all together as one unit, and I'll press it and square it up to 12.5 inches, and I'll show it to you here in just a minute. Here are both of the Acorn blocks. I just think they're absolutely adorable. You could have fun using scraps, and maybe you have a specific fabric that you'd like to use that's in your stash, however you'd like to make them, but I do think that they're just a really fun and simple block. Great way to use up lots of 2.5-inch squares, and a great way to use up your 2.5-inch strips that you have in your stash. Don't forget to pull the PDF, which gives you the information on what you need for the block. It gives you a sample idea of a quilt that you could put together for a fun wall hanging for fall. Make sure that you do press and then square up the block to 12.5 inches. They do need to be squared up to 12.5 inches. They will go into the quilt and finish at 12 inches.
Thank you so much for joining me today as I have shared with you how to make a fun project for this fall or for a Thanksgiving hostess gift, maybe just something for your home that you'd like to put out for Thanksgiving or the fall harvest season. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you do like the content that I provide, please don't forget to like and subscribe. And share this video with your friends and family and quilt guilds. That does help the channel to grow so that it can get out to other quilters just like yourself. And don't forget, I have links below for this quilt behind me. This is the Fall Fields of 4. It was a mystery quilt that I did in 2022, I believe it was. But I'll have the link below for the project, and it'll take you right out to my blog, which gives you all 4 videos and all of the PDFs that you'll need to create this. Until next time. Happy quilting!